Welcome back to Faith and Science in the News. This is your host, Frank Lyon. In this episode, I want to introduce you to a new video series that has been released by the Discovery Institute. The series is titled Science UPRISING, and at present consists of 9 episodes. On my blog and website, you can access the links for each episode. Also included in the content for each episode, just below the videos, are more links to other videos and books of interest on each topic. This series will appeal to high school and college students. The information is very up to date. Let me briefly introduce you to the topic of each video in the series along with the featured presenters. The first video is titled Reality and asks 2 questions. Has science proven we are all just matter? Or does reality extend beyond what we can see and touch? This video features Dr. Jay Richards with Discovery Institute and Dr. Michael Egner, a professor of neurosurgery and pediatrics. They define and demolish the myth of materialism. In the second video, titled Mind, it features Dr. Egner again, along with Dr. Jeffrey Schwartz, a psychiatrist. In this episode, they answer the questions, are we simply robots made out of meat, or is there an inescapable I who makes real choices that can change our lives? In the third episode, Dr. Stephen Meyer and Dr. Doug Axe ask the question, is the software that runs life the result of accumulated copying errors, or does it require a programmer? The episode is titled DNA. In this episode, they unmask the coding of human DNA. In the fourth episode, we turn to physics and cosmology. This episode is titled Fine-Tuning, You Don't Suck. It features Dr. Meyer with the Discovery Institute, Dr. Bijan Namati, Principal Research Scientist, University of Alabama, Huntsville, and Dr. Frank Tipler, Professor of Mathematical Physics, Tulane University. Dr. Tipler, back in the 1980s, invited me to present a lecture on origin of life research in a class he was teaching at the time when I was also a faculty member at Tulane. They ask in this episode the question, is our universe an accident, or does it display exquisite evidence of intentional design? Dr. Meyer also discusses the myth of a multiverse. Dr. James Tour, along with Dr. Axe and Dr. Meyer, are featured presenters in the 5th episode. Dr. Tour is one of the top scientists in the world. I will provide you a link to his testimony in the blog. He is professor of chemistry, professor of computer science, and professor of material science and nanoengineering at Rice University. They ask the question, can life spontaneously generate itself from chemicals? Or are detailed instructions required? The episode is titled Origin of Life, Intelligence Required. They address the riddle of life's beginnings. I have a link on my website to a series of videos that Dr. Tour did on the topic of abiogenesis. In the 6th episode, you will meet Dr. Michael Behe, professor of biochemistry at Lehigh University. I have links to a number of books he has written on my website. His episode is titled Mutations, X-Men, Flub, Evolution. He asks the question, are chance mutations really the key to evolution? Or are there strict limits to what can be accomplished? Limits that point to the need of an overarching designer. He exposes how mutations fail to invent. In our 7th video, you meet one of my favorite mathematicians, Dr. John Lennox, professor of mathematics, Oxford University, emeritus. You will also find reference to other books and videos by him on my website. I love his Irish accent. He is joined by physicist Dr. Brian Miller and Dr. Meyer, both of the Discovery Institute. This episode is titled Big Bang, Something from Nothing. They ask the question, did our universe really begin from nothing? No matter and no creator? Episode number 8 is titled Human Evolution, the Monkey Bias. It features Dr. Jonathan Wells and Dr. Casey Luskin, who are both on the staff of the Discovery Institute. Here the questions are we modified monkeys? Or does nature suggest we are something truly unique? And then the final episode, episode number 9, introduces 2 new presenters, Dr. Gunther Beckley and Dr. Richard Sternberg. They are also joined by Dr. Luskin and Dr. Meyer. The final episode is titled Fossils, Mysterious Origins. It's often claimed that fossils provide convincing evidence of Darwinian evolution in the history of life. But is that really the case? I mentioned this video in a previous episode of Faith, Science, and the News. Dr. Beckley has spoken to our Faith and Science reading group here in the Houston area, providing a very engaging discussion on the biological radiations or explosions we see in the fossil record. He specializes in fossil insects. The series was just recently completed, and I want to introduce you to it. We will return to our discussion of measuring the adequacy of a theory based on the validity of its predictions as we look at the theory of general relativity in the next podcast. I mentioned my website. It contains a lot of information along with links to the podcast and my blog. I will provide the link in the show notes here for the podcast. I hope you enjoy the Science Uprising video series. And again, thank you to the Blues to Joy Ministry Project for producing this series. Until next time, this is Frank Lyon, your host for Faith and Science in the News.